All right, well, thanks everybody for joining us today. I'll real quickly tell you that my secret to success is coming up with a big idea and then surrounding myself with people who are far smarter and more interesting than me. So you all get to benefit from that today as I lead these three into talking about what we think is a pretty interesting topic here. We also would like to have as much of a free flow of conversation as possible. Rather than holding questions to the end, this is a longer, roughly 40-minute talk. So if you have any ideas or questions or comments that you want to interject during, we can see you pretty well. If you want to put your hands up, I'm sure someone will run a microphone over. Also, apropos to the topic, we don't want you to forget. So better to get it out. When you think of it, let's have a conversation and dialogue and hope this is interesting. I don't have a clicker handy, so if you guys can just jump to the next slide for us, I'd appreciate that. I'm just going to ask the three panelists to quickly introduce themselves. I'm David Paul with Dial Smith, and our work is around in-the-moment data collection. We do moment-to-moment dial testing of media. So this really all started with the idea of different tools and techniques for capturing in-the-moment feedback in order to mitigate the challenges with memory and recall. And that then led to the bigger question of what are those challenges and how can they be dealt with in the industry. So Dr. Loftus, if you could please introduce yourself. And sure. AV, if you could please just switch to the next slide for us, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Loftus, and I'm on the faculty at the University of California, Irvine. And I study human memory. And I specialize in the study of people who remember things that didn't happen or remember things differently from the way they really were.
Great. Andrew?
My name's Andrew Jevons. I'm with a company called Mass Cognition, and my background's in psych and statistics and software development. And I wrote an article that seems to have inspired David, so we'll talk about that a bit later.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, and again, in the spirit of keeping things easy, and so you don't have to remember, I'm the other Elizabeth up here. So Elizabeth Merrick, I'm the head of customer insights at Nest, which is the IoT-connected home division of Google. And I'm really here to kind of talk about how do a lot of these memory and recall biases affect business decisions that we're making. Prior to Nest, I was the senior manager of insights for HSN, formerly known as Home Shopping Network. And prior to that, I worked in a number of different industries, from pharma to fast food, on the supplier side as a researcher. So I'm really that pure marketing researcher up here.
Great. Well, thanks, everybody. So we're going to kick things off, Andrew, with you, if you don't mind. And I'm going to ask you the big question. And that big question is, why are we here? Now, I don't mean that in the existential sense. And if any of you know Andrew, he probably has an answer to that version of the question as well.
42.
He has answers for everything. But it was Andrew's Green Book article of a couple of years back that spurred really the idea for putting this group together to talk about issues with memory and recall in market research. So Andrew, kick us off with kind of your bigger thinking around that topic and what you think market researchers need to be most conscious of.
Okay. Originally, I'd written a webinar, we presented a webinar which the article was derived from. The truth be known, one of the primary motivations to begin with the article was to sell software, because that was kind of my job at the time. And what we were trying to do was to work into what the advantages of mobile research was. We had a mobile software product. As I mentioned, I've remained interested in psych since I was done some grad work and that kind of stuff. And I'd happened to read an article by a guy called Jonathan Lerner, who's since been a bit discredited, about some work that was being done with PTSD and how the theories of memories that had evolved such that they could now see a way to neutralize or at least ameliorate the PTSD, which is effectively a very bad, very ingrained memory that constantly evokes a sort of emotional response. And as I thought about this more, it really came to me that market research was making a lot of assumptions about the way people's memories work that simply weren't true. They weren't true because we experience this every day, and they weren't true because there was a lot of academic research that simply said it wasn't true. And I'm sure everybody knows that, you know, we're bad at remembering certain things, like names. I can't remember anybody's name anymore. and we're bad at remembering what happened in the past. We're bad at remembering our emotions. And it struck me that really we were basing a whole set of, the whole industry in fact, on some fairly shaky assumptions about human memory and how human memory works. And that was really the genesis of the article, and I wrote the blog post, and we landed up here on this stage.
And the rest is history. Thanks. Well, so Elizabeth Merrick now as our resident researcher on the stage, taking Andrew's assumptions and presumptions and really putting them into practice. Through your history at HSN and now with Nest, how have you experienced customers' ability, or really lack thereof, to be able to accurately recall things? How's that impacted your work, and do you have a specific example or two where you've seen that put into play?
Absolutely. So if you think about why business people care about memory, it's because we assume that what you did in the past or something that happened in the past can either predict what's going to happen in the future so that we can continue growth, or we can correct something that went wrong. But it's actually very forward-facing. We're not necessarily trying to convict someone and trying to understand whether or not the memory of a witness is correct. We're really looking to make more money in the future. So what memory ultimately comes down to in many cases is attribution of where we're either allocating our marketing dollars, where we're putting our strategy. And so a lot of times the questions that we ask are about recall. Did you see this? Did you do this? Did you have this particular behavior? Because we don't have better sensors out there other than self-reported information in many cases. What's so exciting is just to see the genesis of a lot of these sensors and a lot of these new technologies coming to be, but they're still in very early phases. So I think about a lot of the research that gets done, and including some that I've done, where we will send out a survey or we'll do some kind of post-activity questionnaire, and we'll say, what was your experience? Or did you see this? Did you do that? And maybe you'll do some lift analysis. So we'll say people that were exposed to this or people that weren't exposed to this, did a particular outcome end up better? And of course, we apply our statistical analysis and look at our confidence intervals and make sure that there is statistical lift. But the issue with that is that there's a lot of false positives and a lot of false negatives in there. And so when we're just looking at this from a statistical standpoint, there might be lift, but there's so much noise in there that it's kind of crazy. So when I first realized this was with a prior company, and we had records of every single customer there. And we knew if we were sending you an email, if we were sending you some kind of direct mail, and we had very bespoke control groups and even universal control groups. So we would send out some of these surveys and try and understand did something work or not. And consistently, it was probably around 13 to 20% of people were either saying, yes, I saw this and it was great and let me tell you all about it. And we knew for a fact that they didn't because we did not send it to them. And to have 13 to 20% as a misattribution rate was way higher than what you would expect, and maybe a couple people showing it to friends, or maybe we did have some double records. And it was the same thing on the other end. So we knew that they saw it because maybe they redeemed the coupon, and they're telling me they've never seen it before in their life. So you start to get this chaos in your data, and you have to wonder, what can I trust, what can I not? Should I be taking stock in this? Because if I'm making future decisions based on the data that's coming into me, and I'm saying, yes, we need to allocate another $1 million toward this type of campaign, and yet it's misdirected information, ultimately my role as a strategist and somebody who's helping to build the business based on insights, it might be data, but it might not be good data, and I'm being extremely remiss in my role to use information that I know has such a deep problem with it.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And Andrew, based on the way Elizabeth is explaining that, does that map to kind of what your experiences have been and what spurred a lot of your thinking?
Yeah, I think that's essentially the problem that I believe comes up with research. I mean, we cause these problems sometimes by perhaps long questionnaires. When things become very unreliable, we all know that you can't have long mobile. But I think this is something that has really gone on for a long time. And, the motivations or the reasons for why we have these problems with memory are fairly important. And I think that Dr. Loftus is better to speak about that than I am.
Yep, which is a perfect segue to Dr. Loftus. So Dr. Loftus's background is really more in memory distortion and false memories and memory manipulation. So I think where I'm interested in starting off with your help is what has your decades of research in that field, especially shifting gears a bit, the work that you do in the legal community and your other research projects and teachings, what have you learned over the years about flawed memory and memory distortion and manipulation that you think can be helpful and applicable to the market research space?
So as a cognitive psychologist and a university researcher and faculty member, I have taught courses in human memory and even published some textbooks in human memory. And of course, they would cover the gamut, the usual thing that people think about, which is forgetting or memory problems or, Alzheimer's and dementias and so on. And that's part of the overall field. But in my particular laboratory, we study false memories. So for many decades, I have been deliberately distorting people's memories for past events, making them believe the car went through a yield sign instead of a stop sign, or the bad guy running from the scene of the crime had curly hair instead of straight hair. And it's very easy to expose people to leading questions, to misinformation, to erroneous versions by other witnesses, and to find that this will contaminate, distort, transform the memory of the individual you're studying. Mm-hmm. And then later, in more recent research, we've shown just how far you can go with people. You can plant entirely false memories into the minds of people for things that didn't happen. And when we plant those false memories in our subjects, it has consequences. It affects people's later thoughts, their later intentions, their later behaviors. Mm-hmm. So this is all teaching us about just how malleable memory is.
Yeah. Yeah, and so everyone in here working in the market research field, at one point or another, we're working for marketers. We're supporting the field of marketing and consumer behavior and driving sales. So there are other areas of your work that are actually around deliberately planting those kinds of memories. And what I'm curious about is how marketers might be able to use that kind of, I'll call it manipulation, especially if it's done with, potentially with ill intent. How can that type of manipulation be used, and then potential ethical concerns around using that kind of memory manipulation to actually drive consumer behavior?
Well, I've thought about the ethics of this quite a bit. I haven't solved the ethical problem. That's a kind of societal
We'll do that
issue.
In the next 10 minutes.
Okay, but let me just say that when we did our recent studies where we showed that planting false beliefs and false memories in the minds of people has repercussions. I mean, we planted false memories that when you were a kid, you got sick eating a particular food, like hard-boiled eggs or dill pickles or strawberry ice cream, and people don't want to eat those foods as much. We planted a warm, fuzzy childhood memory about a healthy food, namely asparagus. People want to eat more asparagus. And so with this ability to affect people's memories and affect their nutritional selection, maybe we can make a little dent in the obesity problem in our society.
Yeah.
And this is when I started thinking about these ethical issues. Should we ever take advantage of this mind technology that we are so good at and deliberately plant memories in the minds of people so they can live a life that would be healthier or happier? Or should we be banning the use of these techniques? Mm-hmm. And that's a personal decision.
Yeah,
it really seems like it's on a spectrum there. My marketing mind, as you were talking, was really running there. And there are, of course, at the one end, it's really scary to think about the manipulation that could happen. The other end, it just sounds a lot like advertising. You find this nugget of truth or this common feeling that we all have, let's say nostalgia. And maybe my grandmother never made me chicken soup, but I can certainly, kind of relate to that, and I can think of it. And to be honest, I would tell you if you asked me if my grandma ever made me chicken noodle soup, couldn't tell you for sure, but if somebody were to show me that, it feels real, it feels right, it's something that I relate to, and I want to go buy the chicken noodle soup. And I wonder if there are chances for post-purchase experiences. So we see that something maybe went awry during your purchase or your journey with us as you were experiencing a particular brand. Are there moments that did resonate, moments that were important that can be brought up to the top so that that's what you remember instead? So maybe you don't remember checking into the hotel and the fact that the sheets were a little bit crinkled. You remember the wonderful smell of the lobby. You remember the greeting of the smiles and of the receptionist, those types of things. And so when we think about the entire journey with our customers, are there moments later on that we want to use some of these manipulation? I think even manipulation is the wrong verb for that, but these memory tactics almost that can actually create stronger brands that we can, rather than just knowing that there are biases to our research, can we actually use them to our advantage as we start to find issues, and this becomes part of our recommendation as researchers that we need to be relying on some of this academic research that's done to help us be better marketers as well.
So I noticed that you started to use the word manipulation,
right,
and then you backed off because there's something a little
it feels wrong,
creepy about it. But when I have talked about this work and talked about the practical applications, I've said something like, well, maybe a therapist can't deliberately plant false memories in order to help the patient. Maybe that would be unethical. But what's to stop a parent from manipulating the memories of, let's say, their overweight teenager or child in order to make them not like a fattening food or eat more of the healthy foods? And when I spoke publicly about this at some point, some of my enemies, because I have enemies in this line of work where you're trying to tell people that they have a lot of fiction mixed in with those facts up there, they said, oh my God, there she is, at it again. She's advocating that parents lie to their children. And my response to that was, hello, Santa Claus. The parents will lie to their children. But more seriously, which would you rather have? An obese child with heart problems and diabetes problems and shortened lifespan, or a child with a little bit of fiction, a little bit of false memory, but can live a much healthier life? And I know what I would pick, but on the other hand, maybe I already know how much fiction there already is in our memories.
I think it is arguable that, advertising is manipulation. We all know that. And I don't really see that, by implanting in some way false memories, we're doing anything amoral in particular in that respect. There are plenty of other techniques that are used within advertising that you could say are questionable. But as long as you're not stepping over any gross moral lines, I don't think it's a bad thing. But one thing, it's a slightly different tangent, is we're talking about memory, but there are different sorts of memory. Dr. Loftus' work deals a lot with episodic memory, which is remembering what you did in the past. Last time you went to the store. Last time I went to the store, I think I bought dog biscuits. Probably true, given that nearly every time I go to the store I buy dog biscuits. But I really don't remember what else. But we also have a semantic memory, a memory for meaning. This week I remember what the brand Uber is and I know what it does. And next month I'm probably going to remember that too. I may not remember in the intervening period how many times I went to the store, what I bought, or really what I felt about it.
That's actually interesting also from a marketing perspective, especially when you start thinking about new product design. So this semantic memory, it allows us to create really compelling products that can solve issues. And I think about that especially at Nest, where the founder of Nest was also the creator of the iPod, and you think about the simplicity and just the processes that are in place to make it as simple as possible so that you don't even realize what's happening. So, for example, when I came up here, nobody needed to show me this microphone and say, you talk here, you want to hold it this way, because I'd seen this happen enough, and it also had enough cues in it. There's almost mappings to it, so that I know exactly what to do, and all of that is based on memory. And so if I came from a totally different culture, and if I came from very different context, I might be sitting here talking to you like this, because maybe I only watch boxing and it comes down from above. And so all of these things are really important for us to understand the context, and from it we can actually build better, more compelling products. And the differences between them are really interesting to understand. I'm sure we've all seen products where you're looking at it and you're tapping on it and you're not really sure what to do because there's not a really good mapping, or there's something that actually evokes a thought of something you've seen before. It happens with me all the time with doors, where I think this looks like a pull, so I'm pulling on it, and of course it's push, and everybody's looking at me like I don't know how to use a door. But to me, that's a design issue, where they didn't really understand the context of memory to make something that's really compelling and really useful. A lot of utility is lost because we don't understand how memory really works.
Yeah, that's great. Really interesting. So I think now that we've covered the fact that it exists, and to some degree I'm sure we're preaching to the choir. I think everybody knows to some degree it exists, but there's a certain expertise here from different perspectives that I hope are giving you some different windows into this challenge. What I'm interested in now, with the little bit of time that we have left, is what do we do about it? How do we mitigate the impact of what we know is happening, even if we disagree perhaps to the degree to which it happens? What are the tools and techniques and methods for Elizabeth and Andrew in your work and practice, and then Dr. Loftus also in your more of a clinical research environment, where you've been able to either deliberately exacerbate or find a way to mitigate and minimize those impacts? And really, whoever has a good place to start on that is welcome. Otherwise, I'll let Andrew go.
Okay. I think, market research has beaten to death the idea that we shouldn't have long questionnaires, but we really shouldn't, because it places too much of a cognitive load, and if you like, you could call it a recall load on the respondent. You're giving them long things to do, and it's going to be a cognitive load, and so that's really going to hurt their recall, because their minds are too stressed about going through the questionnaire. I mean, it sounds very simple-minded, but it actually is really important. And I think, you've got to think about whether you're asking about semantic knowledge in a survey, or however you're doing your research, or you're asking about episodic memory. And if you are asking about episodic memory, you optimizing and make it easy for people to recall this information. And I actually think there are probably there's some scope to develop newer techniques for episodic memory recall, which Dr. Loftus will probably have more to say about that, because it does seem to be that really, asking people about what they thought in the past is a pretty shaky thing.
Well, one of the things that, I mean, it may seem kind of obvious, but to at least get somebody's recollection as soon as possible, or if you can even get their thoughts and feelings earlier as they're happening, that would be ideal. But getting a recollection as soon as possible before they have an opportunity to interact with other people, I mean, is one thing we've learned. Because if people are trying to, recall things in a group, then the various responses are going to influence each other. And I don't care if this group is a focus group, or if this is group therapy, or even a jury deliberation. The early responses will affect what people say later on. So, I mean, one thing we do in the research is try to get an early opinion before people have a chance to engage in activities that can contaminate their memory. Mm-hmm.
One of the things that excites me a lot, because we've been talking about the memory biases for our respondents, but we are also respondents. We are also people who are very prone to memory biases as researchers. And I'm sure everybody in this room at some point has said, oh, well, I remember this, so let's put this in. Especially when you're working with qualitative data. There have been many times where I've worked with moderators and I say, what's your process? How are you going through this? And, well, I really try and take some good notes along the way, but a lot of it is stored in my mind, and then I just do a data dump. And that was really accepted for a long time. And it's not anymore because we have these machines to which we can outsource a lot of this analysis, and it brings us this impartial view of our data that I think is really important. And you see it being adopted in qualitative measures and in methodologies much faster than qualitative, and I think that's wrong. There's a huge opportunity in qualitative research for us to find some kind of impartial tool, impartial techniques out there that we can have somebody else who does not have these biases that we do. We can dream, we can create, we can do so many great things to be inspirational with the insights that come in. But if we really want our data to be good, we need to have better text analytics out there that are just constantly pulling in what people are saying and actually doing the synthesis on that. The data is available. The processes are still getting better. I'm not sure that there is a cost affordable option right now for a lot of what I'm describing. It's been cool to walk these halls and to see how much closer we're getting. And I would imagine in the next few years, it's going to be absolutely required that anytime you do something that's qualitative in nature, that the analysis is not totally reliant on humans. I'm excited to see the machines doing this, and I'm excited to see the partnership between the two. And I would just encourage everybody in this room to not only think about the biases of your respondents, but of your own. Because I absolutely am one of those, and especially on the corporate side where we may have certain voices in our ears saying, well, what about this? What about that? Well, we were kind of on the fence here, but I think it's in this direction. We are so prone to these biases, and there's a lot more to discover out there if we can just partner with a lot of the newer technologies where the machines might give us text analytics and might do a quick predictive analytic piece for us. There's a lot of sensors out there that we could be using to understand what's actually happening in the moment, so we don't even have to ask these questions. Bring all that together through some really nice modeling, and I'm excited to see what happens in the next few years with that.
That's great, thanks. Dr. Loftus, we were talking earlier about how all the prevalence of personal technology these days and is actually having the effect of causing distraction on people. The same technology that the research world is lauding about ability to do mobile research and mobile studies is also the technology that we always have in our hands, and that we're taking pictures of the food the minute it's served to us, and we're taking pictures of everything around us and texting it and tweeting it and Facebooking it, which also I would imagine would have impact on our ability to also process and really ingest and digest what it is that we're doing. Is there anything related to your work where you can talk about the distraction that people are faced with, and the fact that these days I think we're all more distracted than ever before, and our consumers are more distracted than ever before, and the impact that that may have on their ability to accurately remember how they really felt about something at the time? And is there a counterpoint there?
Well, there's so many parts to your question, because there's distraction in there, but there's also reminders and the pictures on your Facebook timeline and so on. So I think there are a number of ways that technology connects to human memory. There's a recent study that shows that if people know they can look something up, as they're exposed to the information, if they know they can look it up later and get the answer later, they're far less likely to actually remember it. And then, of course, we all have the experience with I used to know a whole lot of phone numbers, but now I just have to press one button when I want to call my brother, and another one when I want to, call a colleague, and I can barely remember what their telephone numbers are. Then don't get me started about passwords, because passwords, it's a huge problem, especially because we have to change them all the time, and all these different banks and utilities and everything else has different password requirements.
Yeah.
So, you need a robot to handle just your password problem.
Right. Yeah. I think we had a question in the audience. Yes, sir.
Yes. So a little bit of devil's advocacy here. You've been talking about memory, about what people know, but my challenge to you is, does it always matter? Because isn't it, in many cases, equally or more important how they feel? And how they feel may not be based on a specific thing that happened in the past, but there could be a number of reasons that cause them how they feel, and that will certainly affect their purchase behavior. It may not be as tactical as what you would need for product development or communications about product features, but isn't feeling equally or sometimes more important than knowledge?
It's hard. I can't even see where you are. So
He's right in front of you. Yeah.
Okay, but so if I don't look at you, yeah. The thing about feelings or emotions is they, like regular memories, are malleable. So we can not only affect, plant distortions in the minds of people and even plant whole memories, we can alter the feeling that they think they had about a product. I mean, and in fact, some of our experiments are doing exactly this right now, where people have described feeling, anxious to the level of a 2 on a 7-point scale, and later on we go back to them and say, you told us that you were a 4 on that 7-point scale in terms of your feelings of anxiousness. And many people will not detect that you've manipulated their feeling rating, and that becomes their new feeling. So, yeah, feelings are important, but they're malleable too.
Andrew?
I think it's important to remember that generally feelings and emotion don't spring unbidden for most people. So something happened to give you that feeling or emotion. And, trying to separate them from memory, I wouldn't believe that that's actually a valid thing to do. And also that the assumption that people can look inside themselves and introspect and accurately tell you what they feel, I think has to be challenged as well. And different people have a different structure of emotion. We always see, the 8 emotions. Well, really, no. It's a convenient analytic tool. But if you look at some other theories, you'll find that emotions are far more complicated. So, yes, feelings can be important, but they did come from somewhere.
Yeah, and I think as you get into more considered purchases too, knowledge does become a really important part of the purchase journey. I don't see it as an either or, of course, especially when you're talking about branding. That emotion is super important, possibly more so than knowledge. But you can't feel your way into a Home Depot to find a Nest product. You kind of have to know that it's there. You have to remember that it's there. There are certain knowledge points that have to be conveyed, and they have to be evoked when it's time to remember it. And that may not be tied to a particular emotion, or I may not care so much if it's tied to a particular emotion. It'd be great if they were warm and fuzzy and they couldn't wait to go to Home Depot. But at the end of the day, I really need you to remember that you can go there and you can buy your product, and you probably want to go to this particular aisle to get it, because that's all essential to selling my product.
Yeah, that's great. So before we move to any more, we have another question? That's great.
Yeah, my name is Hal Goldberg, and maybe some of you heard my talk this morning about using hypnosis in focus groups to retrieve memories of past product usage or feelings about their early usage of products. And while we have no way to corroborate what they say in these focus groups, a lot of what they tell us are interesting stories that can lead a product developer or an advertising person to get an insight to develop a new marketing or selling strategy. So there are ways to, I think, retrieve memories other than just on the conscious level.
Mm-hmm. Well, Hal, I'm sorry I missed your talk. I would have really liked to do that, because for a long time I have criticized the police use of hypnotizing witnesses to get more information about crimes. And in many jurisdictions in this country, if the police use hypnosis, they can no longer use the witness. So while hypnosis may be very good for getting people to relax or getting them to stop smoking or getting them to lose weight, there's a real question about whether you're getting reliable, authentic memories out of people, because especially when you're dealing with a highly hypnotizable person, they're even more suggestible. So I guess my question for you would be, how do you know what you're getting is worth anything when you use hypnosis to recover memory?
I think the question is good, and it isn't a matter of me judging whether it's worthwhile. It's more the the people who are using the research to come up with new ideas and new insights. And sure, I mean, you try not to have a leading question when you ask someone to go back to their earliest use of a product. And hopefully they'll give you something that's valuable to someone who's trying to develop a new idea from it. So yes, it might be a false memory, but it might be a flawed memory. But it also could be very accurate, and it doesn't really matter that much if you're trying to develop something that's marketable and can be tested later on quantitatively.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you there. I think it's all about what is your outcome, and it's one of the many tools in a toolbox. So if I'm trying to be very precise, I would never rely on self-reported data, whether it's through hypnosis or really any other technique. If I'm looking for inspiration and I'm looking for fodder to create a compelling story, I think it's brilliant and it's beautiful. And your level of precision and the outcome of it is really the two things that I look at. So if I'm trying to understand a particular memory from a respondent, let's say, and they tell me that they were on this beautiful penthouse room for a party on the 37th floor of some hotel. The 37th floor could be really, really important if I'm actually trying to go there and see it, and I don't want to knock on the wrong door. But if it was actually the 35th floor or even the 15th floor, as long as I know that it was high and it was beautiful and kind of all the things that I need to reconstruct a similar type of feeling for a respondent or for my consumers, that's all I really need. But they're two very different outcomes and two very different levels of precision. And so I think we have to just keep those outcomes and objectives very distinct as we're talking about the use of memory and the biases as they come into play here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that hypnosis is a generative thing in that you probably generate what comes out in some way, which in itself can be extremely useful. But I from what I know of it, I couldn't really say, and I'd agree with Dr. Loftus, that it's probably not giving you any facts.
Question, sir?
Yeah, so in market advertising research, there are a number of different techniques that different suppliers use to try to, overcome the issue. Some ask how specific is your memory, and if it's at least a 7 out of 10, then you qualify. And if it's more vague than a 7 out of 10, then I guess you're disqualified. Others ask multiple choice questions to quiz you on, do you really remember the content of the advertisement? And others want to show the full video branded ad if it's a television ad. Others mask the brand. And, it feels like it's all over the map. And if 13 to 20% of the people, aren't remembering a coupon, then I wonder how many people at various levels of validation that they remember these advertisements might actually be remembering them, right? Because you have to qualify as remembering the ad to answer all these diagnostic questions, which are the decision questions, like what do I do with this ad? Do I change it? Do I run it more or less? So yeah, there doesn't seem to be any agreement on a best practice.
Yeah, I struggle with that constantly in every role that I've ever had, because there are not necessarily better alternatives. If you were looking at a very specific campaign, maybe it's just TV or just out of home. There are some really nice technologies, but in today's reality, you have a media mix. And you might have out of home, you might have print, you might have something that's very geo-specific, and then you might have some national ads. And all of that becomes really complicated when you try and do attribution, and especially when it comes to recall. So, that's something that I struggle with every day, and I almost wonder if we have to pull back and we don't look at recall, and that actually comes to us changing the metric that we care about. So we've always looked at top level, kind of awareness, interest, consideration as very desirable outcomes of an advertising campaign, and I agree it is, because a lot of our purchase paths are longer than a few hours or longer than a few days or even a few months, depending on how long your measurement is. And it's kind of this stepwise process. You have to discover, then you have to kind of have the need, and then you have to go and shop, and we all know these purchase processes. But I wonder if we stop looking there, and now that we have better information about individual consumers, and we look more at bottom of the funnel metrics, so conversion. I look at that far more than I look at awareness. And a lot of the questions that you're asking there are more about awareness level questions. We have really good credit card data out there. You buy an app and you have to sign up. There are a lot of individual level information. And if we were able to pair that with something that really understood the ecosystem of advertising, so I know Google does a lot of that because we're kind of everywhere. But if there were ways that we could get this multi-touch attribution down, even better. I would hope that we stop talking about awareness in many cases because we are all trying to drive conversion or a particular behavior versus just something that is kind of pie in the sky to me that is very prone to recall biases.
Yeah, and I think when you're asking people if they're sure, if they remember negative bias, people don't want to say, well, no, I can't remember anything. And you've got to really look at the mechanics of your sample. If these people are doing a survey and they're getting rewarded for it, they're not going to say, no, I don't remember, because they'll be terminated. And that's just the reality of it.
Great. Well, thanks, Andrew, Dr. Loftus, Elizabeth. I think we have to leave it there, but thank you, everybody.
Thanks.